Well, wonderful to be here with you and to reflect.
Oh yeah,
Spend
there I see it. So if
great.
I just say share,
Then we're both on, and I I want to say this is a very special guest that I have on
great.
Facebook Live. We're just making sure we're both on at the same time. So this is a very special guest. Spencer, are you ready?
Yes, I'm trying to just get this back. Let me get, oops, why is it not coming back to me?
So pardon everybody while we get Spencer back on Zoom, I think it is. So we're just about to begin.
Okay, there we go.
All right, great. So this is a very special guest. It's Spencer Sherman is someone that I've known now for over 20 years, and was delighted the very first time we met. I knew that he was somebody really special and someone that would really make a difference in the financial planning world, in the life planning world, and in the world in general. Spencer, are you there?
I'm here, George. Hello.
Oh,
Hello,
good. All right. Hello.
California.
And one of the things, so Spencer and I go way back. He was one of the first people who trained to deliver 7 stages of money maturity workshops. One of the first people to take those workshops with us, and a lot of the clients that I had in my old financial planning business became Spencer's clients. So I was very lucky to have him be take that business on and continue to work well with people that I loved and cared for many years. Recently, he was the one of the first people in the world to host a Golden Civilization conversation. He did it in his office. You can see the office behind him there in California. And we had just an incredible conversation. I think something like 40 people were there. So it was a wonderful, thoughtful, progressive, active engagement with his community. And Spencer and I also share kids of the same age. So we were just catching up a little bit on that. But Spencer, I'm wondering what you'd like to share. We're here for 20 minutes or so with an audience hopefully all over the world, and interested in Golden Civilization, but now interested in you.
Well, hi, George. Hello, everybody. I feel like money has been such a dark taboo topic. And what's so exciting to me, and it stems from the suffering that my family had and I had around money growing up, that we have the potential of really uncovering this dark corner of our lives. And with that, there's the potential for so much liberation, transformation. All that energy that's been contracted around money can be released and transformed. And I have felt that in my own life. My clients have felt it. And I know that your book, The Golden Civilization, is about transforming how we use money and getting money towards the highest uses to really benefit all of us, instead of the way we currently spend money, which is often destructive instead of constructive.
Yeah.
So that's, one of the things, I think about how I think about taxes, George, and taxes are often a negative topic, negative idea, and we feel the burden of taxes. But taxes could actually be quite exciting if we saw it as this investment opportunity, investment opportunity to invest in education, schools, hospitals, libraries, great roads, etc. Taxes could be thrilling, and yet we don't talk about taxes that way. So
Yeah,
You know,
wonderful.
I feel like our visions are very much aligned. And one of the, you know, if I was to throw out a specific idea, George, because I like specifics, is I would love to see, you know, one of the things, I'm a big believer in education. I have kids myself, but it just makes sense to me that we should be investing at the begin as much as possible at the beginning of our lives. That's, you know, there's so many metaphors, analogies to the gardening world. If you get the right soil and you start with the right starters, you'll have you know, a healthy peach tree. And I think it's the same with human beings. And I'd like to see us hire the best teachers for the lowest income areas in this country. I think they should get paid proportionally more money so that we attract them. Maybe it's 30, 40, 50% higher salaries so that the best people are attracted to the lowest income or most challenging areas, and vice versa. We pay teachers in the best areas much less because those kids are getting supported so much by their parents. You know, like people like us, George, you know, we add so much to our kids' education, but children in other areas don't have that support. And I think that we could actually there's an investment opportunity that doesn't have to cost us anything.
Yeah, yeah. Beautiful, Spencer. I wonder, I'm recalling back to our time in California with the Golden Civilization conversation, and I remember something like this coming from you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an inspiring idea. Now, when we're focused a lot on really healing a lot of the wounds, I mean, it's astonishing how so much racism we've seen in our society over the last couple of years, and how much it's then drawn more of, I think, responsible citizens' attention to the problem and to how do we do something about it. This sounds wonderful. Do
Yes.
you have any thoughts about acting on it or implementing it, or it sounds like something that would come out of a golden civilization conversation and that a group might be working on how to make
Yeah, I've started a conversation with Chrissy Houlihan, who's a congresswoman in Pennsylvania, about this. I know her personally. She just got elected in
well,
Pennsylvania. She beat out a Republican.
well,
Uh, and we started a conversation. I've started conversations with representatives in Sonoma County where I live.
yeah,
So we're at the beginning stages,
yeah,
but these ideas are, when I share them, they're welcomed, you
yeah,
know, and so we're just, yes, I do want to thank you for that motivational push, because I feel like it's time for me to start, figuring out how to get some of these ideas implemented.
yeah.
And I like the idea, people like the idea, appreciate the idea that it doesn't have to cost us a lot of money,
Yes.
that there may be a way to do this in a sort of a zero-sum way.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful, wonderful idea. And I mean, I remember back, I had the great privilege of going to a private school. And at some point, I looked at the salaries of teachers in that private school and contrasted it with public school. And they actually were paid less when I did that little piece of survey. And I understood that. I mean,
Yes.
because it made sense. They had the privilege of having not necessarily docile, but engaged students, and students who were already prepared to have those complex conversations with them. Whereas certainly in the more challenging school systems in the world and in America, much more difficult to get those conversations. So all the better to have absolutely the best teachers there to draw forth and to engage in a way that's inspiring.
Exactly, as well as the best facilities. I think all of those things can really help the best, aftercare, teen centers, and all that. Because in wealthier areas, the teen centers are the 5-acre properties that wealthy people have, and in these lower income areas, there aren't safe places for teens to go after school.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
it's really seeing that we all benefit
yeah.
from helping out those who are most challenged.
Very, very much so. And I wonder, you mentioned something as you were beginning to come on board here about the personal challenges
Mm.
that you had faced
Yes.
in your family of origin around money in
Yes.
particular.
Yes.
Uh, and you implied in a way that you'd gone through something that was transformative and brought
Yeah.
much more light into your life around so that you were able to perhaps to give much more back or to be much more creative and vital. I'm
Mm.
wondering if you'd be willing to share some of that, Spencer.
Sure, sure. So when I was 10 years old, I lost my aunt, my uncle, and my first cousins.
Oh, wow.
So this was my father's sister, her husband, and their kids. They disappeared, even though they lived across the street from us. And my father's brother-in-law worked with him in his shoe business every day for decades. And one day they were gone. I asked my parents what happened, and they said they just moved away. And as a 10-year-old, I thought this was sort of normal,
Yeah.
that this just happens, and it was crushing, but I kind of pushed down the pain and said, this is normal.
Yeah.
And then much later, like 25 years later,
Oh,
my
wow.
father told me that his brother-in-law was stealing money from the business for decades.
Oh,
And he made a decision to not bring it up. He decided not to make waves. He was just going to let the stealing continue
yeah.
until he retired.
Oh,
And then that would be it. And he said to me, you know, we didn't get in touch with them. That we didn't have their address. They didn't get in touch with us. So that motivated me to find out to get in touch with these people, because there was no contact for decades.
oh,
And I couldn't, because they had a very common last name.
mm.
I had no way. So I hired a private detective. It was the best $500 I've ever spent, because a week later, I mean, I just could feel it. As you're laughing, George, I felt the tingling as I got this call. I knew it was from this private detective. And he said, I have a phone number for you. And I call up Stephen Gilbert and he was living in New York. I was in California. And I say who I am, and we have this nice conversation, and we get together. I said, you know, I'm going to be in New York next month. Let's get together. So we get together at a diner in New York, and we're chit-chatting about the past. And I say, you know, your mother, every time I came home from school, she would often invite me up and give me this licorice candy every day. And we had this closeness. And then all of a sudden you just hear, I said, Steve, what happened? And he said, well, you know, families just drift apart sometimes. And we're continuing to talk. And I say, am I going to have the courage to say what my father told me? And finally I say, Steve, my father said that your father was stealing money from him almost daily for decades. And Steve goes quiet. He looks down. He looks up and he says, it was true.
Oh.
And I said, Steve, how do you know it was true? And he said, my father told me like a week before he died,
Oh.
he revealed to me that he had been stealing money from your family for decades.
Oh.
And in that moment, I had this healing.
Yeah.
I felt, because I didn't trust my father about this whole story.
Right.
And I thought it was way, way exaggerated.
Oh, oh my.
And I just felt, you know, I felt like this story somehow affirmed him to me, my connection to him.
Wow.
And I realized in that moment, wow, you know, here I finally had the difficult money conversation that my father chose not to have.
Right.
And it produced something really good.
Wow.
And that, no wonder why I became a financial advisor, because that's often my role. It's to help people have these transformative or difficult money conversations, to have that conversation with their son about, we're going to leave you less money than our daughter because, you know, she doesn't make it as much money as you, or whatever the difficult conversation needs to be. That's often my role.
Wow.
So I said, that's, you know, all of a sudden it felt I felt aligned in terms of my choice of profession.
Yeah.
That's why I entered this field.
Wow. Incredible. What a
Hmm.
story.
Hmm.
I don't think I've heard you tell that story before. That's
Mm.
astonishing. What a powerful.
Well, for so long, I think many of us we have things happen to us as children, and we
Right.
normalize them.
Yeah.
And it's only from starting to tell it, and I've been starting to share it a little bit, that people reflect back, like you just did, that that is really unusual and odd. And all of that reflection back also motivated me to hire this private detective.
Wow. Wow.
Like,
Wow.
people said, you should be in touch with your first cousins and your aunt and uncle.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Fantastic. And I have to ask, how's your relationship with your first cousins at this point?
Yeah. So, I have a connection to him, a less connection to his sister, who I was not as close to growing up.
Hmm.
Uh, and it's stilted, of course. I mean, there was a 35-year gap of not only no connection, but also not even hearing anything third party about each other,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
we were that separated.
Yeah.
So we really had no sense of each other's lives. And now to come into each other's lives, as adults from age 10
Yeah.
is a little bit awkward to
Yeah. Of
say,
course.
but we've been communicating. He actually attended my daughter's bat mitzvah
Oh.
last summer.
Oh.
I paid for him to come out.
No.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Wow.
we've
Wow.
had some beautiful connections, and it's going to take some time for our friendship to ripen.
Yeah. Of course.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Wow. What a beautiful story. And what a beautiful story about the power of confronting the darkness
mm,
that we've experienced in our lives and moving forthrightly through it. I'm most impressed with your taking action,
mm,
coming to the point where you knew that it was time to take action and then making it happen. And then the courage to actually say that about the theft.
mm.
Again, so many of us hold back from those kinds of experiences. No wonder that you and I formed a friendship so many years ago, exploring both of us these dark areas around money and realizing that if people move through them, they come to much greater vitality in their life.
Absolutely. And even if you uncover something as dark as theft, as you've written about in the 7 stages of money maturity, that there's such power to integrity and just uncovering the truth and doing whatever needs to be done. I mean, now there's all this restorative justice movement. And I feel in some ways that we did that. Like, my first cousin and I have done that in a way by talking about it.
Right, right.
And yeah, our conversations are not about, we have not needed to make his father into some villain, but really move forward with who we are today.
Yeah, yeah, great, fabulous. And if I can move
Yeah.
from that topic, personal, intimate topic, to drawing lessons from that and looking broader. I'm wondering what you think. I know that you've got a fabulous community in Sebastopol, just a fabulous community that I've had a great privilege to spend a number of hours with. People of great wisdom, people with much experience, people committed to issues of justice, issues of the environment, issues of transformation in society, issues dealing with inequality. And I was very moved by the community. There was so much wisdom there. I'm wondering, just thinking for yourself, having gone through these experiences, noticed this movement from darkness into light, and reflecting on what we have now happening in America, but also all over the world. And as you know, one of my outrageous objectives or challenges is, let's cure these problems and let's do it in a single generation. So let's make it happen. It's time. Let's stop doing all this game playing around politics and little
Yes.
compromise here or there. Let's make it so that it works and make it
Yes.
so the integrity's there, the authenticity's there, and we're right on aim for delivering a golden civilization, so our kids really know it and are proud of what we've done. So thinking about that for a
Hmm.
moment and taking that challenge on and reflecting on the darkness that we find. I was just, as you might know, I was just in Mumbai and Hong Kong, of all places, where we know some real challenges are happening, in Singapore and in Tokyo, talking the same message. But I'm curious for you, where you've come from and what you've seen, thinking about the darkness that's out there. What
Yeah.
if there was one thing that we were to do that would really shift the darkness toward the light, so that we might be able to, in fact, deliver a golden civilization in a generation? What do you think it would be?
Well, it's funny as you suggest that I reflect from that my own story and learn from that, and then the golden civilization and the circle that we did together in your book. It's what's coming up for me is that is challenging as it is. I think that you and others are proving this, and there's a website called All Sides that's about getting people from extremes to talk to each other. I think it's having these difficult conversations. They're risky, but I think there's much more upside than downside. I mean, we've seen all the downside. It can't get that much worse. We're stuck. We're not really moving the needle on climate change like we know we need to. We're not cooling the planet, and that's obvious from this summer we've had, where it's been in the 90s in Maine. I was roasting up in the middle of Maine this summer. It's time for me and all of us to start to, in a way of trying to, not of opposing another, but of just sharing what's true for us. It's time to start extending ourselves to people who may have some different beliefs. I think, and having these conversations and getting those people who are neutral or passive about climate change, maybe recognize the problem, but don't really want to be involved. Those are good people to talk to too. Those are easier people to talk to than people who just don't believe in climate change.
Right.
I think it's having these. They're messy conversations, right, George? It's so much easier to talk about. Well, it's funny. I was going to say the weather, but the weather's is so linked to climate change. But that has always been such a benign topic, right? Or talk about sports is a way of connecting with someone in a non-volatile way, right?
Right.
And yet there's not much has come from all of our conversations that all of us have had about sports or the weather, right? So I think, given the juncture we're out in the world, I feel motivated to start having these much more powerful, or albeit riskier, conversations with each other. And I think you're a great voice for how to do that in a way which to produce real animosity or political violence between each other when we have these discussions.
Boy, I mean, as you know, we have a conversation model that holds kind of boundaries very clear, and we keep the conversation positive as we go forward. And
maybe that's a key right there. Is here's what I want to see happen. It's forget about climate change. Here's what I want. What do you want? Because I want to hear that. And I know we have different ideas on how to get there. And could we hold that and see that there are some things we have in common, and maybe that's a good starting ground. To see the common ground that we can stand on together. Yes.
Well, I'm inspired by your thoughts there, Spencer, and inspired also by so much by your story of the conversation that you had in the moment, that difficult moment, where that moment where we say to someone, however we say it, I'm really concerned about the climate. I'm really concerned about the survivability of the human species and other species and the planet as we've known it. I'm really, really concerned.
And you love this planet, George. You want to see this planet thrive.
Right.
It's like you're having a good time. You want the planet to keep going in a healthy way.
Yeah.
And I think everyone could get on board with that. I think
Yeah.
if we all have found so much joy in our lives at some moments. We've all had moments of joy,
Yeah.
right? And maybe that's what we have to connect into with each other, is
Yeah.
that we want those moments to continue.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And what I just, this is a wild fantasy, but I'm going to throw it out toward you and see if there's any resonance at all. Just your conversation with your cousin,
Mm.
thinking back to that and how you took that moment on. Gosh, Spencer, you are so wonderful at that, at framing those difficult conversations. I would love to see you filmed on film having a difficult conversation with someone about climate change.
Mm.
I, I would, boy, I would give anything to just watch
Well, all right,
and
maybe.
learn from it.
I think that would be great. It is interesting. You just reminded me that I took up the job of studying difficult conversations. There's a book by a bunch of Harvard people from like the Harvard Negotiation Project called I think it's called Difficult
Yeah,
Conversations.
yeah, yeah.
And so I've developed kind of a whole protocol. I've merged together wisdom from several different sources. And I have a protocol for my organization at Abacus. Like
Wow.
when two people have an issue, there's a pathway to resolving it.
Wow.
So this is a passion of mine.
Yes.
If you're reminding me, and maybe it did start with some of that difficult conversation that I had.
Yeah.
Of saying, I understand that your father's been stealing from my father.
Yeah.
Not the most pleasant thing to say to somebody.
Yeah.
But saying our truth, I
Yeah.
think can be it's a very intimate thing to say. Especially one can say I was making him wrong or putting him down, but I wasn't really. I was just trying to state a fact about his father, that my father thought that this
Right.
was my father's belief.
Right.
I
Right.
sort of couched it in some way so that he could hear it without feeling like I was really coming after him.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I know you've done so well at Abacus with the team that you have there, and I know you do great trainings within Abacus, and also that you've trained at Esalen and other places as well in a variety of ways. Just hearing all of this, Spencer, I would love to see you take this conversation into the some of the challenging political realm that we find ourselves in, the polarization that we find ourselves in. And as I say, I would just soak it up
Wow.
watching you.
Well, you're getting me excited. It's funny that I'll tell you a little secret about me is that I love Republicans. I love conservative people.
Yeah.
And I have many of them as clients.
Yeah.
And I think what I love about them is the challenge. There's a part of me that's attracted to challenge.
Yeah.
And I'm not an adversarial person.
Right.
But the possibility of there being a meeting of the minds with somebody who thinks differently is in some ways more exciting, more compelling to me than just having a conversation with somebody that just agrees with everything I say.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So that is exciting to me as I hear you speak about it.
Yeah. I think it would be exciting to many people if there was any way you could actually put it on film and show it, because your presence around all of this is as deep as your knowledge is strong. And so anyway, thank you so much for sharing all of this today, and let me know. I think we're approaching the end of our time together. Is there anything you'd like to close with? Anything else you'd like to say?
I'd say, I don't want to say just go out and have difficult conversations, because there has to be an appropriateness to the conversation. But to at least have the conversation to ask your therapist or ask a friend, is this a worthwhile conversation to have? Or your financial advisor, or a trusted person in your life. But I think so often we're biased against the difficult conversation. And that my experience and from with not just me, but all of my clients is the odds are so overwhelmingly in your favor of producing something good from those conversations.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like I had a client who had a conversation with his son about that he wasn't going to leave him any money. And that conversation went so well. And I've also had it where they refused to have that conversation. And then the client passed and it didn't go well. You know, that's because the child, even though the 60-year-old child is very smart and Ivy League educated, he assumed that my father didn't have the conversation because it was this, he didn't love me. That's why he didn't leave me any money.
Oh.
So we make up stuff, the smartest of us.
Yeah.
And I think there's a real opportunity and to recognize our bias and to have those difficult conversations anyway with our, well, just I gave a program last week. Someone said to me, I'm getting married next month. And you've given me the confidence to talk to my fiance about all the debt he has. Never had a conversation and they're getting married in 4 weeks. So it's like, of course, that can only be, I think, a forwarding conversation. It's way worse to just push it aside.
Right. So what advice would you give us all who have family members who are on the opposite camp in terms of politics? And we know this is happening all over the world, even in India. I was in India just the other day, and a woman who had one of those and clearly from deep in the Hindu tradition, when she was asked what was in the golden civilization, she said no religion. And the reason she said it is because the Hindu nationalists have been so strong and so conservative in a way over there. And the polarization has happened over there as it happens in the US and the UK with their polarizing issues. So what would you say to that kind of polarization with a family member? How would you address that kind of conversation?
I would say that that get agreement that we're both going to die one day. That usually most people will agree with that. Start with something simple, and that we could continue. It's fun talking with you about sports or weather or whatever safe topics you talk about. But we both know that there's this much larger issue that we avoid, and maybe for some good reasons. But I would love to brainstorm with you on how could we delve into this arena and do it in a productive way. And then collaborate, like, maybe we, work together, and maybe it's by like, we're only going to say positive things about what we want instead of what we don't want. Like, we're going to go, what do we want to see in the world instead of exactly like, how do we get there? What are the what tax code do we use? No, what are the virtues you want to see? What do you want in terms of your air quality, your water quality, or what do you want to see in terms of health and education? But collaborate on that, to come from that beginner's mind of not knowing and saying, let's brainstorm how we delve into this topic because I care about you and I want to lift our relationship. And I know that if we delve into this arena, it might be risky and tricky, but there's more intimacy in a richer topic like that.
Beautiful, Spencer. It echoes so profoundly the model for golden civilization of really starting with an inspiring vision that's shared. And we're all human beings. We tend to share pretty much the same beautiful vision of who we might become. And you've just reminded us of that.
Yes, and we're here for just such a relatively short time, and we lose sight of that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, George.
Wonderful conversation. Wonderful. Always wonderful.
You and to be with your community. This has been great. Aloha.
Continue. And look forward to more. Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye, George.